Thank you everyone for being here today. I'm excited to announce our guest. We have Joe Mussatto. He's a beat writer for the Oklahoma City Thunder and also covers Oklahoma football, men's basketball, and softball through the Oklahoman. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be with you guys.
So first off, can you just start by talking about your background in writing and how you got into sports?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Oklahoma. I majored in journalism, kind of always knew I wanted to go into that. And, from there, I think a path like a lot of people, I started working for the student newspaper, the Oklahoma Daily. My first beat was softball. I covered men's basketball, football, all kinds of things, whatever I could. And then, got a couple internships, then moved to Lexington, Kentucky, and covered Kentucky football and basketball for 2 years. And then I'm from Oklahoma City originally, so I moved a little closer to home and, covered OU football for a season and a half, basically. The OU Texas game this year was my last game, and then I got moved over to the Thunder beat when Eric Horn, one of our Thunder beat writers, got a job at the Athletic. So it's been kind of a whirlwind.
So once you got your role with the Thunder, was it kind of always a goal of yours to write for the NBA, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I think so. I think NBA and college football were always my top two. Those are the sports I followed most growing up. I mean, especially here in Oklahoma with college football as big as it is. But, once I got the opportunity to cover the NBA, I was very nervous at first, but then, wanted the challenge of that. But it was just kind of crazy because so many writers who I looked up to were on the NBA beat, and all of a sudden I'm seeing them at these arenas now. So it was kind of crazy to get started with them.
Are there any similar trends you see in your writing that you do for the Thunder as opposed to your collegiate writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it carries over. I mean, just those reporting instincts that you look for. I think the biggest difference between college and the NBA is, at least at a public university like I went to, you've got the benefit of using public records and freedom of information requests to your advantage to try to supplement some of the off the field type reporting that you do. The NBA obviously doesn't have that. It's also different talking to college athletes who you at least feel like you can relate to on some level, and then in the NBA, it's these, you're talking to millionaires and people who are, in my case, much older than I am in some cases, but also some that are younger. I mean, Darius Baisley for the Thunder, he's 19 years old, so it's been really fun. But yeah, I think there's a lot of carryover.
There's always a lot of talk about being diverse in this industry. Did you maybe start out in producing or broadcast and find out that wasn't your thing and then switch to writing, or have you always been on the track with writing?
Yeah, I think writing has always been my track. Now, when I first started, I don't know, maybe I'm too much of an old soul, but I'm oh, I'm going to be a newspaper reporter. Well, those things, it doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, I work for a newspaper, but I don't get a newspaper. I assume that most of you guys probably don't get a newspaper, but you can read their content online. So I think my biggest shift was more print side to digital. And then just making that transition, knowing that, there's no such thing as a print reporter anymore. There's no such thing as a digital reporter. We do video, we do podcasts. After every game, we're doing something along those lines.
I think a lot of people. Go ahead.
Do you feel that there is a need to kind of be a jack of all trades as a reporter in the industry nowadays, as opposed to how it used to be very one person does one job? Do you feel like there's a bigger need to have that larger skill set nowadays?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're just doing one thing, I think it's going to be, one, harder to get a job, and two, it's going to be harder once you get that job to move around, because for a Thunder game, let's do that for example. I'm filing a story right at the buzzer. I start writing around the third quarter. You're kind of trying to work on your story, finish the game, boom, that gets published. Do a follow-up story later on, and then after that, me and my beat partner Maddie Lee, we shoot a video after every game, probably 2 to 3 minutes for the website. Just kind of a normal recap. And then after that, it's a podcast we do that runs about 30 minutes. So we've got a podcast after every single game. And, those are things where like in college, I didn't really learn that, like how to produce a podcast, how to, um, how to even like what techniques or like what advice people have for like, I don't like hearing my own voice. And then every time I have to, hear the podcast playback, I'm like, oh gosh, that sounds terrible. But it's just like little things like that, that it's constantly evolving. And the bad part of it is like, you're not going to get paid more because you're doing more stuff. You just have to do that because everything is moving so quickly.
Do you feel like there should be additional financial compensation, I guess, for how well you do these different things that a reporter usually wouldn't do like a couple years ago? Do you feel like that is part of, or it's just kind of part of the job? Like that's new reporting. That's like what it is now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what it is now. It's, I mean, this is a good example. Like we're in the middle of pretty much the biggest story of our lives, arguably, with the coronavirus pandemic. And a lot of my job is not even like covering the Thunder anymore. It's like helping out on news side, because that's where they need the help. Obviously compensation doesn't change. If anything, you're seeing a lot of newsrooms undergo pay cuts right now at the Oklahoman and other Gannett properties. We're on furlough. So for this month through June, 1 week per month, we're off basically with no pay. We can't work. There's no pay. So it's just kind of like the nature of the industry. I mean, that's like a whole other discussion. But yeah, I mean, we're all doing more, I guess, for less in a way, not to be all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
What kind of challenges do you find now since there's not any sports going on, just trying to keep that content fresh for everyone?
Yeah. So like, sometimes the beat that you're covering will like make that easy on you. Like for today, I wasn't on this because I'm not allowed to during furlough, but my beat partner was on a call with Chris Paul. He basically had, I don't know how many people were on it, maybe 10 to 12 with local media who were doing like a conference call just to generate some sort of content during this time, because the Thunder is traditionally tight-lipped and, it's hard to talk to any players outside of practices, shoot-arounds, games. So stuff like that. I think you just have to get creative. Like, I was there the night that, Rudy Gobert tested positive. The NBA shuts down. The Thunder Jazz game is postponed. Coming off that, we're like, okay, we got to find better ways to tell this story. So one, we did like a timeline of everything that happened, like everything that we had tweeted or, videos that we had filmed on our phones. Those all have timestamps. So we just went through and get a timeline. Another thing is like the halftime performer. He was brought out early because they needed something to occupy the fans before it was postponed. So we talked to him and told his story. Just, stuff like that, like out of the box ideas that you can have during this time.
And speaking of that, what was kind of the emotion in the arena when that Thunder Jazz game got postponed?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. A lot of confusion from a reporting perspective. From where I was sitting, I saw the Thunder lead doctor sort of run out, and all of a sudden he's like in a huddle with the officials, and you're like, okay, this doesn't normally happen. What's going on? And like, this is in the wake of everyone knows the coronavirus exists and what it is, but it's not yet to the point where we're even talking about like having fans not in arenas anymore. Like the Chesapeake Energy Arena was packed that night. So once that happened, I mean, I think everyone, at least on press row, the reporting instincts kicked in. We tried to go in the tunnel toward the Jazz locker room, but they had already sectioned all of that off. We talked to a lot of fans. That was one of the easiest things we could do. Like, what was it like to be here on this night, and do a lot of fan-centric stories. Because no players, no league officials were talking that night. So basically, we just spent, I mean, we were there till probably about 2 a.m. That's when the Jazz bus finally pulled out after Oklahoma health officials had administered all of them tests. And we didn't really get anything, but we had to stay in the arena to make sure that, like, to even get the shot of them, like, walking out of their locker room, just like that 10-second clip. Didn't end up getting that because they exited another way, but it was a crazy night for sure.
When you covered your first NBA game, was there anything you wish you knew or anything you weren't prepared for?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think I was. I don't think I was necessarily prepared. I mean, it's just, I mean, your background in journalism, the other games that you have covered sort of prepare you. But I think, at least for me, there's like that sense of nerves every time you're covering a game because you know that if people aren't watching it or if people want to read about it afterward, like you're their source for that. And I think there's a lot of pressure. And with the NBA, I mean, the only thing I had followed it casually as a fan, but I had never reported on it professionally. So my only background was in college, and college basketball, college football. I knew the setup. I knew when practices were. I knew when press availability was. I knew who I could talk to, who I couldn't talk to, different sources. NBA, you've got to come in. And this is not like NBA specific, but just any new beat that you're on, you have to meet new people. You have to get used to, like, there's no such thing as like shoot arounds in college, at least that are open to the press, at least that I've covered, but NBA, it's a regular thing. So just like the schedule of it, I think that's where I wish I was more prepared because I don't think I was used to it till probably 2 months into the season.
You mentioned how difficult it was to speak to athletes on the Thunder. We kind of go through a similar thing here up at University of Oregon. They're called SIDs, and they're kind of in charge of each individual department, and they kind of control who the media, which players they can speak with. Did you find any particular avenue to kind of work into better relationships with the Thunder and be able to speak to players, or is it kind of like a broad stroke thing for them as an organization to just kind of be difficult for who reporters can chat with?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a reputation for, I mean, they certainly wouldn't want to phrase it as being difficult, but I think it's pretty accurate. They very much follow the model of the Spurs, in that it's, everything, they want to control the message. They're very, like after practice, it's like, okay, these are the guys that are available. Now, they do often, allow one-on-ones if you've got a good story idea. I think that's the key. Like, give those SIDs a reason. Like, this is why I need to talk to this person because of this. Like, I've got this great feature idea. I want to ask them more about, this thing. And usually it's not like what they're doing on the field or on the court. Maybe something about their background or their family or how they grew up. Come to them with a really good idea. And I think if that SID then shares that story pitch with the player, they'll be like, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Like, not many people know about that. That's a good idea. The other thing is trust. And I'll speak more from like a college standpoint, just because like that's where a lot of my background was as well. Like with those SIDs, I know sometimes it's frustrating because they'll feed some of the best stories to like national writers and people who just parachute in for one weekend and want to tell the best story. Gain their trust, show them that you can handle these stories and you handle them with a lot of care and you want to do the best that you can. And I think if you consistently produce good content and good stories, then they'll be more apt to let you talk to certain players. Now, some of them are just extremely difficult and you've got to go around that. So like at OU, Kyler Murray was basically off limits for one-on-one interviews. Like there was no way you were getting to him for a one-on-one. So the other way around that is like you call his mom, you call his dad, you call his best friend from high school, you call his high school coach. And once you find that best friend who's like, sure, I'll talk, then at the end of the interview, you ask him, who else would be good for this story? Like, who else do you think I should talk to? And he'll be like, oh, this guy could give you a lot of good stuff. So I would say just go around that. And also as a reader, I'd much rather read that than, just quotes from the player, from the coach, because everyone has those. Get the stuff that no one else has.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. That was really insightful and kind of I find it difficult, at least, to kind of get around those SIDs, especially with such a big brand that Oregon is. And I can definitely see the similarities between them and the Thunder. So, yeah, thank you.
And you also mentioned those relationships. Has there been anyone in the industry who's helped you come along in your career?
Oh yeah, a lot of people. Like my biggest mentor is probably my college advisor at the student newspaper. His name is Seth Prince. He actually used to be the sports editor at the Oregonian, but he's from Oklahoma originally and came back. So he really helped us because he instilled kind of a professional atmosphere in our college newsroom where, like, you know, he would get on it, like he couldn't control what we were writing, but he would get on us if we got beat on something. He's like, well, did you see what this other, you know, what the person from the Oklahoman or the Tulsa World wrote? Like, you should get that next time. So he was a big mentor. And just, you know, my beat partner covering Kentucky, his name is Kyle Tucker. He works for The Athletic now. He was a big mentor, just a very good writer. He's got a great personality, and that you know, sometimes helps as far as, like, if you're really outgoing, people sometimes are easier to talk to. I'm not like that. I'm more like introverted, and sometimes it takes a little longer to build up that trust. But, like, you know, no matter what personality you have, you can connect with people. Just find common themes that everyone can relate to. And I think that's the biggest thing. And then here at the Oklahoman, our columnists, Jenny Carlson and Barry Trammell, I think they're like two of the best there are, and they really inspire me. And, you know, they're people who I can email my story to before I publish it, and they can look it over, and they always have the time. So just reach out to people who have been doing this a heck of a lot longer than I have, and just pick their brain, because it's changing a lot, and they can pick your brain too. Like, there's stuff that we might be better at as younger people than people who have been in the industry for 30 years, because it's changing so fast.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Just always reaching out to new people and see what they have to offer. For people that are interested in sports writing, what do you think is the best content to be producing right now in our collegiate careers or young adult careers?
Yeah, I think if you can really, you know, own a beat, no matter what sport you're covering, how big or small. I mean, college newspapers are like the perfect place, because there's no shortage of sports, and you can cover anything from volleyball to softball to soccer, football, basketball, anything. But just find those stories. Like, I loved the smaller beats in college, because, you know, you look around and you're the only one with your phone out recording or recorder, and, you know, you're getting that story when no one else has. So when you're on your beat, first thing I do is go through the media guide. And I know that might be something you don't think about, because it's like easy to overlook, but or if there's no media guide, like online, look at player bios. Usually there's like a detail in those player bios, like fun fact about you, or like something about their family, and you're like, I've never heard about this. I don't know this story. No one's done it. Talk to them about that, and then they'll appreciate that you notice that, and then go from there. So, like, if you can make connections with players and coaches on like one beat, I think that really translates well to working professionally, because, you know, like, my aspiration, I'd love to be like just like a feature only writer, you know, just chase the best stories there are, spend 3 weeks to really dig my teeth in on a story. There's so few of those jobs available, but most of those people came up through covering a team and beat writing. So that's really the path of entry to get to whatever job you want. And that's not just like print or digital focused. I mean, you can do that through podcasting or through video, and treat it the same way.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because my beat for this winter was acro and tumbling. No one knows what it is, but it's just a great way to get exposure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think you definitely learn a lot too from just writing more, whether that's about acro and tumbling, football, basketball, whatever it may be. Just getting, I guess, a different voice, you know, a different view on something is always pretty awesome to get. Just more experience.
Yeah, I mean, you'll look back and, even from like your junior to freshman year, like look back at some of the stuff you wrote and you're like, wow, I was trying really hard, but that's not the best thing I've ever read. It's just like the more you write, you really notice how much you improve. And like, that's not to say you ever need to think like you're there, because like this is such a hard thing to do, and like writing is such a grueling process. Not just writing, storytelling, again, whether it's through video, audio, or writing, it's very difficult, not only to find a good idea but then to turn that into a compelling story. So just keep searching for that next thing, because again, like it's just practice, practice, practice. Like, just keep working after it, because it's not like, I don't know, stuff like it never feels like it's fully complete. And you always wonder, looking back at a good story, like, man, that was a really good idea. I wonder if I could have done something differently with that. But then the next idea will come along and you'll be like, okay, I wanted to do this thing with that story. I think I can do it here. And it just keeps evolving.
Speaking of being stuck, if you know you're approaching deadline, you kind of running out of things to say, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, so deadlines really stress me out, but obviously they're a big part of the job. Um, okay, let's say, I mean, the toughest thing is like deadline writing. I always hope for a blowout, either from the team I'm covering or whoever they're playing, because then you've got plenty of time to write. Now that's just like the nervous person trying to make deadline inside me. But we all want the compelling games and the best games. But those are the hardest to write about, because say your deadline is 10 minutes after the buzzer. You've got to start having something, I would say basketball or football, third quarter, second half, 10 minutes in the second half, something like that. Um, just write out paragraphs. And it doesn't have to be the beginning, it doesn't have to be the end, but if you catch on to a key sequence and that's going to be important later, just write that out, and then you can kind of maneuver your story around a little bit. During games, I use Google Docs, and I just make the title that game, that date, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and key plays that stand out. I don't do a running play-by-play, because that's all available. I can go back and find that. Now, some people do, and I think that's okay. But if you do time, score, just describe that play. And then when you're on deadline and you're like, geez, what did that look like? How do I describe that? Well, you've already done it. You just write it in your story. Now, print is a little different. I try to say, I know I have to make a deadline for print. The paper's got to go out. I know it's not going to be my best product, so I just internalize that, and you've got to file for print. But web, don't beat yourself up if it's not the best you can do, because once you go into the locker room after interviews and stuff, you can refine that story and tweak it a little bit. Obviously that's harder if you're on a strict deadline for print, but I would say just make sure you're writing during the game rather than trying to do everything right after.
Right, that's great advice. Thank you.
So we know you're from Oklahoma City, and you're currently living in Norman. Are you a Trey Young fan?
So the whole Trey Young experience, I was in Kentucky at the time. By this point, I was kind of like, the fan switch for some stuff is still turned on, but covering OU, I was kind of like tuned out. Wasn't really in that stage anymore. But from afar, I think Trey took too much heat here at OU. Like a lot of OU fans sort of turned on him by the end of the year when they were struggling, which was crazy to see. So I'm really happy to see what he's doing with the Hawks. He comes back to Oklahoma a lot, and I've talked to him at a couple like charity events and stuff, and he by all accounts, he seems like a great guy. So I'm definitely a Trey Young fan, the person, and like you got to love his game. He's one of the most exciting players in the league.
I'm from Atlanta, so that's my boy.
We had the chance to interview the Hawks announcer, Bob Rathbun, the other week, and he loves calling games for Trey. So that was cool to hear that crazy world. It's like weird how, like, what is it called? The 6-arm rule, how you like link people together, stuff like that. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Does your voice remain constant for every team that you write for, or does it change depending on the team?
Man, that's a really good question. I think it starts out the same for every team. Like, for example, writing about Kentucky, just like you guys, we're all sports fans. We all know somewhat what is going on, like, with Kentucky basketball. Like, everyone has like some idea, and that's for any sport that we follow. But like, when you get there, you're writing for a group of like dedicated diehard fans that know way more than you do. They know the history of everything. So like, I think your voice has to adapt for that. You can't come in day one and like pretend like you're the authority on what you cover. You've got to gain the reader's trust. And I think you do that by good sourcing. I think you do that by reading a ton, going into whatever job you're taking about the beat that you're going to cover, and make sure you know what's going on. And I think your writing voice evolves over time, because very soon you do become an authority on that. You know the players better than the fans do. You know the behind the scenes stuff. You know the coaches. And I think that comes through in your writing. I'm not like a columnist. I rarely use first person in my writing, but I think just the knowledge that you have on your beat can come through in any way. Like, when you're transitioning from a quote, when you're describing the game, when you're describing a player. So I think that evolves over time. I would just sort of guard against going all in, like right when you start something new.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great advice. Thank you. And then I guess a follow-up question to that would be, do you have kind of a writing structure that you apply to every piece, or is it really dependent on the content of the story each time?
It very much depends on what I'm writing, as far as how I structure it. Like, game stories, I would say I sort of structure similarly. I mean, there's like a template maybe we all have in our mind for what a game story looks like, but feature stories are totally different. I hope I'm answering this the right way, but like, if I'm tackling a big feature, I'm not a great outliner. I would like to be better at outlining my stories. And I think everyone's got different ways. Like, don't let anyone tell you have to outline a certain way. Like, whatever makes sense for planning a big story, do that. Do what makes you comfortable. For me, I just lay out like maybe 4 main ideas. Like, I want to talk about this, 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 and this. And like, that's my outline. And I usually, let's talk bigger stories for a second. So like, I usually have a good idea of how I want to start. You need to know how you want to get readers hooked. You've got to have a good lead. I would say that first section has to be good. I like writing in sections, because sometimes it's too hard to make a transition, and you don't have the space to. So make sure that first section has a good hook to end it. And then I go in the ending. Like, when I'm writing, I want to have a decent idea of how I'm going to end this story, because like, I want to build up to that point. You want to build up in the beginning, you want to build up at the end. And that body of the story gets you to each of those points. So I don't know, structures, like, it's a very hard thing to like master. I feel like I'm always working through it. Like, how do I want to format this story? But it helps to have a good idea going in of how you want to lay things out. If any of you guys want to tell me how to structure stories, I'm all ears, because not one of my specialties.
Do you have a favorite story or an article that you've written? Or would you say there's like one that stands out as your favorite above all others?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's some that definitely stand out. it's hard for me to like grade myself like, wow, that was really good. But just like some of the ones that I enjoyed reporting the most, I'll do one just maybe recency bias, but one from OU and one from the Thunder. During OU's first game last year, um, um, they played Houston, and instead of being in the press box at the stadium covering the game like normal, um, I wanted to tell the story about Ricky Dixon. Ricky Dixon has ALS now. He doesn't speak. He can't walk. He's confined to a wheelchair. He had quite a good NFL career playing for the Bengals, but a lot of people, including his family, think football accelerated these injuries, specifically these like brain injuries that can cause ALS. So he was being inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, and they were going to honor him at that game, but he didn't want fans to see him like that. So Barry Switzer, the legendary OU coach, he lives right off campus, and he invited Ricky to drive up from Dallas or his family drove him up there, and they watched the game from Switzer's house. And I said, I wanted to find a good way to tell that story. So instead of going to the game, I had the luxury of having a beat partner who was covering the game, but I spent the whole game at Barry Switzer's house writing Ricky Dixon's story of, they were watching the game on the TV, the game that was happening less than a mile away at OU Stadium, and just seeing his smile, and being able to interview his son who was there and his wife who has taken care of him for throughout his illness, and talking to Coach Switzer was probably like the most powerful story I've written, because he can't talk, but he's got like this yellow sheet, and his son, like it's got the alphabet on it, and his son moved the sheet in front of his fingers, and when Ricky blinked, that was the letter, and he's like spelling out every answer. So it takes a really long time, obviously, to get like a quote out of him, and you feel bad because like it's putting him through so much pain. But I didn't even like want to do that. I just wanted to talk to those around him and sort of like write that story. So that was probably my favorite from OU. Thunder, I'll go through this quickly because I talked about that more than I thought I would. But
that was a really awesome story. I'm definitely going to have to go take a look at that one after this for sure.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thunder, there was Sam Presti, their GM. He went on the Woj Pod earlier this year from Emerson College in Boston, and that's where he went. And he talked about, at the end of the podcast, it was like a throwaway line, basically. He said that his coach at the time, his coach's name was Hank Smith, and he was really hard on Sam. Sam was like a good D3 player, but not great. Never had like pro aspirations or anything. And he said his coach told him about this kid named Phil Barlow, who was a high schooler at a nearby Boston school. And he was like, Phil Barlow is better than you are. You need to see the game like Phil Barlow. And it's like, none of us know who Phil Barlow is. Like he never played in the NBA or anything. So I just wanted to look him up. I was like, who's this Phil Barlow guy that basically Sam could never be as good as? He's an acupuncturist in Boston now, still lives in Boston. I called him up and kind of told his story, and like he was so kind of like thankful that like someone like remembered his good high school career. Like he sent me these old press clippings that were in the Boston Globe and Boston Herald. He was actually a really good player. Like he was invited to the McDonald's All-American game, never played in the game, but was an invite, and played D3 ball. But I just talked to Sam about that, and he never talks about anything like Thunder related, but he would talk about that story. So just like an off the wall thing like that. I really enjoy the off the field stuff that you feel like you can really tell someone's story, and that you can give readers like a behind the scenes look at something that they might not have even known about, or that especially no one else is going to write.
Those
Awesome.
moments are so priceless too, so it's great that you were able to do that. I know you kind of walked us through your end game process, but what are you doing the hours leading up to it?
Yeah, I think that depends, with whatever you're covering. I like to get to the for I like to get to the arena like 2 hours early for basketball. Like the NBA's got a pretty strict schedule that 90 minutes before each game the home coach talks, and then after that the away coach talks. So I want to make sure I'm there for that. But I'm not really like doing anything before games, but I just like to be relaxed a little bit and not feel rushed. Sometimes I'll like read more about the team that's in town that night, because like things move so fast in the NBA. It's like you don't have too much time beforehand. Um, Also, just like those are times where you can like just talk to the SIDs, talk to the PR staff, just like hang out with them a little bit on a non-professional level where it's like everything's so transactional, that it's good to just get to know them a little bit more, get to know the fellow writers. But then after interviews, I mean, I just go to the court, set up, grab a bite to eat, and just want to make sure everything is laid out. So like no big secrets, but just get into a routine and feel good about what you're doing.
Great, thank you. And lastly, I think a lot of people are on this narrative that journalism is dying. So what's kind of your hope for the future with print?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So like we just got bought by Gannett not too long ago, and they've assured us that we're not stopping printing every day, but like the Norman transcript. I live in Norman right now. It's the small paper in Norman. They're stopping printing Mondays and Tuesdays now. So I think print. I mean, it's not dead now, but it could be dead soon. That doesn't mean like journalism is dead. I think we're just going to have to find different avenues to get our stories out, because, like I said at the beginning, I think you know, I love like the feeling of a newspaper and like flipping through newspaper, but I don't subscribe to a physical newspaper. I just don't think it's something a lot of young people are doing. We just need to, like, no one's a print reporter anymore. We're all writing for the web, even if we work for a traditional newspaper. Like, I hardly ever see if my stories go in print, where my stories go in print, just because like I'm so focused on, okay, like what's the display on the website? How much traffic are we getting? What do the numbers look like? No one read this. Why did they not read this? And once you figure that out, like maybe you don't need to do that anymore. Like don't do stuff that people aren't going to read. So journalism as a whole certainly isn't dead, but we've got to find different ways to engage readers. And I guess we're also passionate about this, passionate about storytelling, and everything that the journalism means. I think a lot of regular people or consumers don't always see that. So I guess our goal to keep it alive is to write and tell and share the stories that make people realize, okay, this is such an important thing that we have to keep alive. We've got to subscribe. We've got to keep reading their stuff. So it's definitely scary. I'm not gonna like shy away from that. Like it's hard to get a job. We definitely missed out on the golden age of journalism when pre-internet, pre-Twitter, when everyone relied on newspapers to get their news, and we were making tons of money off advertising. That's just not happening anymore. But I think we've all got to keep thinking of ways to adapt and to think of something new, because like the answer is not out there right now. And because, a lot of papers are still losing money. But like something like The Athletic, like that gives me a little bit of hope, because if they can survive, that means, okay, enough people are willing to subscribe to something. Enough people are willing to pay for it. Newspapers miss the chance on that.